Hello and welcome back to A Rose by Any Other Name, the vodcast where we pull Shakespeare apart piece by piece and work out what his plays are actually doing. I'm Mr. Rose, and today I'm combining Act 2, Scene 2, and Scene 3 of Othello. That makes sense because Scene 2 is the shortest scene in the play, and rather than me creating a video where I talk about like a handful of lines, I'm able to actually go into a little bit more depth in this video. Short does not mean unimportant, however. Scene 2 announces a party, and Scene 3 reveals that Iago has already worked out how to turn that party into a weapon. The Turkish fleet has been destroyed, Othello and Desdemona are reunited, Cyprus is safe, Othello gives everyone permission to celebrate both the military victory and his marriage. And for approximately 5 minutes, things are going extremely well. And then Iago takes the freedom, alcohol, and excitement of the celebration and converts them into disorder. By morning, Montano is wounded, Cassio's lost his position, Othello has trusted the wrong man, and Desdemona's kindness has become the next stage of Iago's trap. Our central question for this episode is, how does Shakespeare show Iago turning human weakness and genuine goodness into tools of destruction? On the screen, yet again, is my AI generated image of our characters in case you need to try and remember who is who. Let's jump in. So, Act 2, Scene 2 begins with Othello's herald making a public proclamation. The Turkish fleet has been completely destroyed, so the people of Cyprus are invited to dance, light bonfires, feast, and celebrate. They're also celebrating Othello's marriage to Desdemona. The festivities will run from 5 in the afternoon until 11 at night. This scene creates a public mood of relief, freedom, and unity. Military danger appears to be over, Othello is honoured as a noble general, and his marriage is woven into the community's celebration. Scene 3 begins with Othello placing Cassio in charge of the night watch. Othello specifically warns him not to let celebration overcome discipline. Cassio agrees and says that he will personally supervise the guard. Once Othello and Desdemona leave, Iago begins working on Cassio. First, he tries to make Cassio speak sexually about Desdemona, but Cassio remains respectful. Iago then offers him wine. Cassio knows he cannot handle alcohol. He says so clearly and initially refuses. Iago pressures him by appealing to friendship, hospitality, and the expectation of other soldiers, and Cassio gives in to this peer pressure. While everyone drinks and sings, Iago tells the audience that he has already made Roderigo and several other Cyprus soldiers drunk. His plan is to place Cassio among them, provoke a fight, and make Cassio offend the island that he's supposed to protect. The plan works. Cassio becomes intoxicated and insists, with the confidence unique to intoxicated people everywhere, that he is definitely not drunk. Iago then tells Montano that Cassio is an excellent soldier whose drinking problem makes him dangerously unreliable. Roderigo provokes Cassio, Cassio attacks him, Montano intervenes, and Cassio wounds Montano. Remember, Montano is our governor of the island. Iago sends Roderigo to raise the alarm, then loudly performs the role of the shocked peacemaker. Othello arrives furious. Iago gives an account that sounds reluctant and balanced, but it carefully directs blame towards Cassio. Othello dismisses Cassio from his position. Cassio is devastated, not primarily by the physical fight, but by the loss of his reputation. Iago comforts him and advises him to ask Desdemona to speak to Othello. The advice sounds sensible. Desdemona is kind, Othello loves her, and she will genuinely want to help. That is exactly why the advice is so dangerous. Iago plans to interpret Desdemona's support as evidence that she is sexually involved with Cassio. Her goodness will create the evidence used against her. So let's have a little bit of a closer look at some of our theme focuses. So Shakespeare decides to use scene 2 as the calm before the storm. It's public, formal, and controlled. A herald speaks with Othello's authority, announces the destruction of the fleet, and sets clear boundaries for the celebration. The next scene, however, takes every part of that order and overturns it. Celebration becomes drunkenness, fellowship becomes violence, and the men responsible for defending Cyprus become threats to its safety. This contrast is important. Iago does not need to create a completely new situation. He takes Othello's generous proclamation and corrupts it from within. Shakespeare decides to make the celebration dramatically ironic. So the people believe that they're celebrating two victories, the defeat of the Turks and the success of Othello's marriage. The audience knows that Iago is already attacking both Othello's command and his relationship. The timing makes the celebration deeply ironic. Cyprus is most vulnerable when everyone believes it is safe. The external enemy has disappeared, so discipline relaxes, and internal enemy gains freedom to act. Shakespeare therefore complicates the idea of victory. A society cannot defeat an obvious threat while remaining blind to corruption inside its own ranks. Shakespeare decides to establish Cassio's tragic weakness. Cassio is not simply tricked into drinking without warning. He recognizes that he has this vulnerability. He knows that alcohol affects him badly and admits that he has very poor and unhappy brains for drinking. This matter, this matters because tragedy often depends on a collision between manipulation and personal weakness. Iago creates the circumstances, but Cassio still chooses to drink despite knowing the risk. Cassio's weakness is not alcoholism in the modern clinical sense. It's a dangerous combination of low tolerance, social pressure, pride, and poor judgment. He values courtesy so strongly that he allows it to override his self knowledge. Shakespeare makes the decision to present Iago as a director of behavior. Iago arranges the scene like a performance. He firstly prepares Roderigo, intoxicates the soldiers, pressures Cassio, damages Cassio's reputation with Montano, and then triggers the fight, which and orders Roderigo to raise the alarm. He then changes roles. The instigator becomes the peacemaker. He shouts for everyone to stop and performs concern for the safety of Cyprus. As the audience, we can see both the preparation and the performance. This dramatic irony positions us to admire Iago's skill while being horrified by what he chooses to do with it. Shakespeare wants to show us if reputation can be manufactured. So before the fight begins, Iago quietly tells Montano that Cassio's drinking is actually a regular problem. This is false because but it gives Montano a frame through which to interpret Cassio's behavior. When Montano later sees Cassio drunk in violence, the lie appears to be confirmed. One real event is made to support an invented history. This is a pattern that you should track, across the play. Iago combines fragments of truth with false context. His lies are persuasive because other characters believe that they are reaching their own conclusions. Shakespeare reveals both Othello's strengths and his vulnerabilities. Othello responds to the brawl as a military commander. He stops the violence immediately, demands an explanation, and insists that even someone close to him will face consequences. His decision to dismiss Cassio is understandable. Cassio was responsible for the watch, he did disobey a direct warning, and he wounded the respected governor of Cyprus. The problem is not that Othello values justice, the problem is that his judgment depends on Iago's account. Othello already believes Iago is most honest, so he reads Iago's apparent reluctance as proof of fairness. Shakespeare decides to make reputation both identity and a weapon. Cassio experiences the loss of office as the loss of himself. His repetition of reputation shows panic, grief, and the inability to imagine identity beyond public status. Iago dismisses reputation as this false social invention, even though he has just destroyed Cassio by manipulating it. His words sound philosophical, but they're strategically useful. By calming Cassio, he gains the opportunity to direct Cassio's next action. The contrast exposes Iago's flexibility. He treats reputation as meaningless when speaking to Cassio, but he relies on his own reputation for honesty whenever he needs authority. Shakespeare transforms goodness into evidence of guilt. Iago's advice is powerful because it is genuinely practical. Desdemona is compassionate and Othello is devoted to her. If Cassio asks for help, she's likely to persuade her husband to reconsider. Iago does not need Desdemona to do anything wrong. He only needs her to behave consistently with her own generous nature. The more strongly she supports Cassio, the more material Iago will have to misinterpret. This is one of the tragedy's most disturbing ideas. Virtue offers no automatic protection in a world where a skilled manipulator like Iago controls the meaning of actions. Lastly, Shakespeare decides to use imagery of animals, disease, and hell. Drunkenness transforms Cassio from a sensible man into a fool and then a beast. Iago later describes his scheme as divinity of hell and imagines pouring pestilence into Othello's ear. These images show moral and psychological corruption. Cassio temporarily loses reason, while Iago disguises evil as helpful advice and plans to infect Othello's thinking. The language also connects manipulation with transformation. Iago does not merely deceive people, he changes how they behave, how they see other people, and eventually how they understand themselves. So, how is the audience positioned through these two scenes? The audience is positioned to enjoy the energy of the celebration while recognizing that Iago controls its direction. The songs, drinking, and comic behavior creates entertainment. But that entertainment becomes uncomfortable because we know the intended outcome. We're also encouraged to hold two ideas about Cassio at once: that he's a victim of a carefully designed trap, but he's not completely innocent of responsibility. He knows his weakness, accepts the drink, and becomes violent. This complexity makes him more convincing than a simple victim. Othello's punishment of Cassio is similarly complex. From the evidence available to him, dismissal is a reasonable military decision. The audience's frustration comes from knowing that the evidence has been arranged by the man Othello trusts the most. Most importantly, we're positioned ahead of the characters. We see Iago's plan, watch it succeed, and hear the next stage before it begins. Shakespeare replaces surprise with dread. The question is not whether the trap exists, but how long it will take the others to recognize it. Let's have a look now at some of our key quotes. Every man put himself into triumph, some to dance, some to make bonfires, each man to what sport and revels his addition leads him. This is said by the herald, and the inclusive phrase every man creates a mood of communal release. Dancing, bonfire, and revels turn military victory into public celebration. In an exam, you can use this proclamation to establish the dramatic contrast between the collective order in scene 2 and the private manipulation that then corrupts in scene 3. Our second quote, full liberty of feasting. The phrase full liberty suggests freedom, but the specific time limit shows that Othello's freedom still operates within boundaries. Iago exploits that temporary relaxation of control. The celebration is not dangerous by itself, but it supplies the conditions that his plan requires. Let's teach ourselves that honourable stop not to outsport discretion. Othello's warning here places honour and restraint against excessive entertainment. Outsport suggests allowing pleasure to outrun judgment. This line creates direct foreshadowing. Cassio's failure to precisely that celebration overwhelms the discretion required by his office. Oh, this quote. You should remember this quote for your exams. Iago is most honest. This short, declarative statement captures the central dramatic irony of the play. Othello expresses complete certainty about the least honest character on stage. The use of most shows that Iago has not merely gained trust, he's established an exceptional reputation that allows his later evidence to appear reliable. I have a very poor and unhappy brains for drinking. Cassio understands his vulnerability before the disaster. His confession removes the possibility that he simply did not know how alcohol affected him. This quote supports a balanced argument about responsibility. Iago engineers the trap, but it's Cassio's decision to ignore self knowledge that helps the plan succeed. If I can fasten but one cup upon him, he'll be as full of quarrel and offence as my young mistress's dog. This verb here, fasten, said by Iago, makes the drink sound like something attached by force. Iago understands that one additional cup will be enough to release Cassio's aggression. The animal comparison degrades Cassio and shows Iago treating people as predictable creatures whose weaknesses can be activated. Do not think, gentlemen, I am drunk. This is my ancient, this is my right hand, and this is my left. The comedy here said by Cassio comes from contradiction. Cassio's attempt to prove sobriety provides obvious evidence that he is drunk. Dramatically, the humor also lowers Cassio's status before the violence begins. Shakespeare lets the audience watch reason and self control disappear in stages. My blood begins my safer guides to rule, and passion, having my best judgment collied, essays to lead the way. Othello recognizes anger beginning to overpower reason. Blood and passion represent emotion, while safer guides and judgment represents rational control. At this point, Othello successfully restrains himself. The line, nevertheless, foreshadows the later tragedy, when Iago will make passion permanently overwhelm judgment. Our next quote: Cassio, I love thee, but never more be officer of mine. The conjunction but provides private affection from public duty. Othello may love Cassio personally, but military responsibility demands punishment. This complicates Othello's characterization. His judgment is firm and understandable, but even though it rests on a situation Iago has secretly constructed. Reputation, reputation, reputation. Oh, I've lost my reputation. I've lost the immortal part of myself, and what remains is bestial. The triple repetition captures Cassio's shock and obsession. He describes reputation as the immortal part of identity, while life without it becomes animalistic. The quote here shows how social judgment can shape personal identity. Iago attacks Cassio's position by controlling how others interpret one night of behavior. An enemy in their mouths. Alcohol here is personified as an invading enemy. It enters voluntary through the mouth and steals reason from within. The image mirrors Iago's broader role. Like the wine, he is welcomed as a friend, but operates as an internal enemy who removes judgment. Divinity of hell, when devils will the blackest sin put on, They do suggest at first, with heavenly shows as I do now. The oxymoron divinity of hell captures Iago's method. Evil becomes persuasive by appearing moral, loving, and helpful. Iago's advice to Cassio is outwardly heavenly because it could restore his career. Its hidden purpose is hellish because it will endanger Cassio, Desdemona, and Othello. I'll pour this pestilence into his ear that she repeals him for her body's lust. The metaphor turns Iago's language into a contagious disease. Othello's ear becomes the entry point through which suspicion will infect his mind. The image emphasizes that jealousy will not arise naturally from Desdemona's behavior. It must be deliberately introduced and cultivated by Iago. And our last quote: So will I turn her virtue into pitch, and out of her goodness make the net that shall enmesh them all. The verb turn summarizes Iago's power to interpretation. Virtue becomes black, sticky pitch, while Desdemona's goodness becomes a net. This is the scene's central paradox. Desdemona will be endangered not because she's unfaithful, but because Iago can make her kindness look like proof of desire. So let's bring it all together. Act 2, scenes 2 and 3 chart a rapid movement from celebration to crisis. Othello opens the evening by offering Cyprus controlled freedom. Iago studies that freedom, identifies its weakness inside of it, and converts festivity into disorder. Cassio falls because Iago's intelligence meets Cassio's vulnerability. Iago makes a defensible judgment based on corrupted evidence. Desdemona has not yet acted, but her future kindness has already been assigned by a false meaning. The scene therefore establishes Iago's most important method. He does not force characters to become completely different people. He encourages them to act according to the qualities they already possess, then controls how those actions are interpreted. Cassio's courtesy and pride, Othello's trust and discipline, and Desdemona's compassion all become materials for the plot. For an external exam, avoid reducing this scene to Iago gets Cassio drunk. A stronger argument explains how Shakespeare uses dramatic irony, contrast, reputation, and the manipulation of interpretation to show a social order being corrupted from within. On the screen, again, are my exam-focused discussion questions. I will not be going through these. You are welcome to pause and have a go with these questions. It is really important you have a go. Most of them can be answered just from watching the materials in this video. So my final challenge, I want you to choose one turning point from these scenes. The proclamation, Cassio accepting the drink, Iago's conversation with Montano, Othello dismissing Cassio, or Iago advising Cassio to seek Desdemona's help. I want you to explain the event. Identify how Iago controls its interpretation, and analyze how it advances Shakespeare's wider argument about the themes of trust, reputation, or appearance versus reality. This three-part distinction between what happens, what it is made to mean, and why Shakespeare uses it will help move an exam paragraph from retelling into analysis. So that brings us to the end of Act 2, Scene 3. The celebration is over. Cassio has lost his position, and Iago has created the exact meeting he needs between Cassio and Desdemona. In Act 3, Scene 1, Cassio begins trying to repair the damage. By Act 3, Scene 3, that attempt at repair will become the foundation of Othello's jealousy. I'm Mr. Rose, and this has been A Rose by Any Other Name. Thank you for watching my video.